All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the 1.73 podcast. Today we are joined by Coach John LaFontaine. John, thank you so much for being here and being a part of the 1.73 mission. I'd like to get started with just a little backstory on you, where you grew up, take us through your journey to be coaching, where you are today, and just a little brief overview.
Sure. Thanks, Henry. Thanks, Preston. Was born in St. Louis, Missouri. My dad worked for Chrysler and had worked at the St. Louis plants for 10 years. Was transferred back here to Michigan. We moved into a home in Waterford, where actually I still live now, the home I grew up in. My dad worked 30 some years for Chrysler, had long drives to Detroit and Windsor. We started hockey in St. Louis, my brother and I, very young. And when he was 6, I was 7, we moved to Detroit, to Waterford. Fortunate enough to be on a small lake there, Williams Lake in Waterford. And so whenever we weren't playing with a youth team at Lakeland Ice Arena in Waterford or Detroit Skating Club, we were on the pond, on the lake playing. We never played for, back then it was S&A Industries. Little Caesar still, I think we're just starting out. We played at the highest level with youth hockey, but we never won a state championship. We came second one year, but we kept a group of players together for many years, and eventually came time to make decisions on where to go next. As a senior, I stayed and played juniors here in Michigan. My brother decided to stay and play a third year of midgets. So we were on the same team every year until then. My dad would always help coach. So he played as a junior in high school for CompuWare. It was CompuWare's first year of sponsoring teams. And then I played for the Fraser Flags in the Great Lakes Junior Hockey League. The next year, we both ended up in Canada. So I went and played in the WHL. I was hoping to get a scholarship by playing juniors here. I did, but I didn't know anything about Miami of Ohio. And I wasn't enlightened. I was, if it wasn't Michigan or Michigan State, then I was not going to do it. So I went and played in the WHL. He played in the Quebec League. He was drafted very high there after a really strong year of midgets. It was great learning experience, tough year, but great learning experience out in West Vancouver Island. Came home, wasn't sure what I was going to do. I knew what Pat was going to do. He got drafted that July, very high, obviously, to the Islanders. And I ended up getting an opportunity because I was American, could go play in the OHL. The team that I had played on was in disarray a little bit out west. And so I ended up going to play for the Toronto Marlies the next year. We played right out of Maple Leaf Gardens. It was a fantastic year. Really enjoyed it. Really felt like it was great, but it kind of, it was a year that kind of clarified for me that I wasn't probably going to make it in the NHL. Happened to meet a girl in between those 2 seasons in the summer. So when I was in Toronto, I kept dating her. She's from Columbus, Ohio. She's a Buckeye all the way through and through. We have a divided home. My son's a Buckeye. My daughter is a Wolverine or Spartan. We'll take both. Whoever can beat those damn Buckeyes. But anyway, had met her. We dated while I was in Toronto. She was going to the University of Dayton. And that next year, it was, for me, it was a tough year, but I decided to try to go to school. I had been taking classes in both seasons in Canada, not a lot, but I ended up going to OCC for the first semester of that next year, and then transferred to the school that I didn't know anything about, Miami of Ohio. The only school that gave me a half-ride scholarship 3 years before. And I chose it because it it was the closest school to where my girlfriend was going to school. I'm just being honest. Ended up really enjoying it. 2.5 years later, graduated and started working at Chrysler. Got married a year later, and worked 7 years in the factory for Chrysler for 5, American Axle for 2. And then for me, I'll never forget, I was on my knees praying to God, where do you want me, Lord? I was in a stamping environment for Chrysler. It was 7 days a week. I was on the midnight shift. I enjoyed the work, but I was questioning, where do you want me, God? And of course, my faith had been growing. Lori was very strong in her faith, was a great influence on me, my girlfriend and then wife eventually. But oh my gosh, I didn't expect God to answer the next day and the day after, make it very clear that he was guiding me to go coach. And so I ended up coaching for 3 years downstate here, 1 year for Compier, 1 year for the Detroit Freeze in the Junior League, Great Lakes Junior League, 1 year in Windsor for the Windsor Bulldogs. And then I get a call from Jeff Jackson asking if I'd come up, be a head coach for him at Lake State. When my and had been married then, and when my mother-in-law heard that, she was always UAW, worked for General Motors, and she can't believe I was leaving Chrysler because I only left a little bit to coach down here, and then I went back to work full-time and coach. But now I was going to have an opportunity to coach with a salary, and that's when we just trusted, okay, God, you know where you want me. You know where you want us. So, well, I think we counted up a total of 11 moves, moving that eventually got us back here. But many years and a great journey, a wonderful journey. It was always, okay, God, this door is closing. Where do you want us next? And we went from the Sioux at Lake State and also the Sioux Indians up there to Bozeman, Montana, which was eventually in the North American League junior team. One of our favorite, if not our favorite, places to live for 7 years. Then to Shattuck St. Mary's in Minnesota for 7 years because Bozeman Ice Dogs, the ice rink was sold, turned into a beverage storage distribution center. No more ice rink, no more team, was sold to Alaska. So God opened the door, made it clear to go to Shattuck for 7 years. My kids loved it. Son got to play hockey there. My daughter met her future husband there. They're married and have a daughter now. And then 7 years at Shattuck, two years down in Wichita Falls, Texas, coaching in the North American League again. Then up to Muskegon for 2 years, coaching in the USHL with the Lumberjacks. And then moving into the house I grew up in for 7 years now and coaching here in Cranbrook.
That's did travel or moving ever get tiring?
Yeah. Yeah, they say the toughest thing you can do is moving is stressful. And when you want to add on to that, we only had a couple short moves. I mean, moving up to the Sioux was not a short move. The Sioux to Bozeman was not a short move. The Bozeman to Minnesota was not a short move. Minnesota to Texas was not a short move. Texas to Muskegon. And I guess our closest one was Muskegon to Waterford. So a lot of, yes. Yeah, a lot. The positive is you got to purge every move. You got to realize we don't need all this,
Right.
stuff. So, yeah, a lot of moving.
We moved from Chicago to Detroit. It'll be 21 years this next month.
Wow.
And I remember, Henry's heard this, the best $500 I've ever spent, John, was getting the 20-yard dumpster and parking that sucker in the driveway and just throwing stuff out. I'm like, we're not bringing that to Michigan. We're not bringing that.
Yep. Yeah, we call that purging. And
yeah.
We actually had to do that when we moved to Waterford because my dad hadn't been doing well, and my mom passed away in '04. He never remarried, and he tended to accumulate instead of So the house, best thing, we had a dumpster overfull, and very quickly. So yeah.
Yeah, and Henry probably won't remember this, but he was 3 years old at that point in time. We did say, like, listen, if you misbehave, you might find yourself in the dumpster. So just saying.
That explains a
So
lot
what
today.
brought you to Chicago and then back, or were you born in Chicago?
So I married a Detroiter, but I grew up north of Chicago. So I was probably still am, John, to some degree, a bit of a Blackhawk fan.
How did you meet your wife?
Oh boy, that's a totally different podcast. We met in Chicago. She was visiting a friend. It was Halloween. I was wearing the most beautiful floral print dress with spaghetti string straps and a big blonde wig, and she tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You've got to be one of the ugliest women I've ever seen." Struck up a conversation. I come to learn she knows more about hockey than most guys I knew at that point in time. She's a crazy Red Wing fan. And anyway, one thing led to another. We dated off and on for a bit with a little bit of a break. When I moved to Florida for a few years, we both found ourselves back in Chicago. She had actually moved there. I had moved back, got married, started a family. And then one of the adventures, part of our mission, we realized was in our faith. A lot of folks would say, probably for 10 years, like, why did you move from Chicago to Detroit? Like, that sounds crazy. And what has revealed itself is that, like, God's put us on a mission that meant moving here and doing great work and meeting amazing people here in Detroit. Yeah, it's just been a treat.
Fantastic.
You shared about that moment where you realized, I don't think, whereas if I understand correctly, your brother Pat you had a career in the NHL. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, there was that moment where you realized maybe this isn't, like, I'm not being called for this, or this isn't the next step for me. I'm curious, John, like, what were some of the things you were thinking about? And I'd be interesting. I'm curious about, like, what are some of, like, almost, if there was, like, a relief that realization occurred, but also, like, what was some of the disappointment or frustration?
So you really have to go back 2 years, Preston. When I was out west, if you look on paper and see first-year juniors in the Western Hockey League, wow, it looks like as a rookie you had a pretty good year. The team that I was on, and there's some kids that a lot of my teammates played in the NHL after that. But I knew that from my waist on down, I didn't have enough strength to compete like I needed to. Now that doesn't mean it was over. It was a last place team. By Christmas, we had our third coach and our third general manager. And that was a year that I went through a period where you could say I was depressed by the end of the year. Yeah. My brother was just tearing it up in the Quebec League, and I'm seeing how good he's doing. And I sit back and go, well, every year Pat and I played together, we were, I don't how to measure it by points, but we were always 1 and 2. And 1 year he never won 2 years in a row, and I never won 2. We always alternated every year. So why is he doing so good and I'm struggling? My dad was my hero. I came back from that year, and I just straight out asked him, Dad, what do you think I should do? And he said, you were always good in school. Maybe you should consider going to school. But I didn't hear that. I heard you're not very good in hockey. And I wasn't sure until I got the call from Frank Bonello. He was the GM of the Toronto Marlies in the OHL. And I, s- I don't know why. Maybe with the way he handled it, maybe because I felt like there was some unfinished business. I was excited to say yes and keep playing for another year. At the same token, what I didn't say earlier was um, that year I got back from the WHL. We had gone to Montreal to watch him play against Laval in the playoffs. They ended up beating Laval and going to the Memorial Cup. So I got to see my brother play. We drove up to Montreal. Quick little story. My dad and I were watching them play Laval, and Laval had this guy named Mario Lemieux. And my dad and I are watching, and I'm like, Dad, he's lazy. He just kind of
Mm.
floats, waiting for the puck to come to him. I don't see him having a good NHL career. So that probably said a little bit about my scouting ability there.
Right.
And so, but anyway, I got back from out west. The season had ended. We didn't go to the playoffs. Got to go see Pat play in the playoffs. It was great. And my buddies called up, and the year before we had gone as seniors, we went to a Florida senior trip. They said, "Hey, John, there's 7 of us, 6 of us going to go down. We don't start our jobs till late." And I was going to start a job in 2 weeks. I go, I'm in the same boat. I went down there with them. The first day there, I meet Lori, and she talks about her faith. Two weekends later, after getting back, I go down and stay at her parents with her. She takes me to church on Sunday, to a Baptist church, Southern Baptist church. I was raised Catholic, and I accused her of telling the priest that about. I said, "Did you tell that priest about me?" Because he was talking to me. She said, "First of all, he's not a priest; he's a pastor, and he's married and has kids." And I go, "Oh, I like that. I like that." But you told him about me. She goes, "I didn't say anything about." I said, "I swear he was talking about me." Right.
Mm.
So, but I also, also realized that I was in a really tough place, and because I want that to happen to everybody. I want everybody to find God in the way that, and not that I didn't find God as a Catholic. It was presented differently. Um, I was in a tough position mentally of what am I going to do? Am I a failure? Because you know, my dad didn't help, but in a way he did. He was just being honest, and in a way it did. But I heard the message, and from then on, I was on fire to want to continue to learn, because what what that message allowed me to do was take the pressure off. I'm no good. I'm a failure. I don't measure up to, God doesn't judge you on that. He just wants you to trust in him. He's telling you we're all flawed. We all need work, need help, and he can help us change, but he can help us get better, but focusing on the right things. And my life, and obviously from that day on, I sit back and go, I don't know where I would be without that trip to Florida, meeting Lori, and our journey ever since then. So we've gone to everywhere we've gone, we find a church, and it's never been the same. I guess we've never been back to have to go into a Catholic church. That's nothing against it, but we just always found, grace with Grace Church. And gosh, when we were in Harvest Bible, there was no, no name. It was non-denominational, so that's how it's been. So.
Mhm. What was the just by hearing your story, it sounds like that. So let me back up. We talk a lot about the hero's journey on this podcast, just in daily life, and I don't know how familiar you are with it, but there's
What journey?
the hero's journey.
Heroes journey. Okay.
So the call to adventure, the ordeal, the return to reward, and there's that moment if you're watching a movie or reading a book where the hero is called to something greater and they have to sacrifice their ordinary world for it. So, one of the most iconic examples is Luke Skywalker. He's a moisture farmer in the desert. That's his ordinary world, but he wants to be called to something greater. But what's holding him back, what he needs to sacrifice is being there for, his aunt and uncle who are trying to shelter him from the truth. And so, just hearing your story, it sounded like there was, that part of your ordinary world you had to sacrifice, the wanting to go further in your player career, and oh, I'm not measuring up, I'm not as good, so what was it like, I guess, the day after, where you kind of gave up that, not necessarily, I don't want to say sacrifice, but you kind of handed that over. It's like, okay, God, like, I'm no longer gonna worry about this. Like, can you speak to that, I guess, sacrifice, or that letting go of that ordinary world to go on? Because it's almost like, you end up getting yourself stuck, holding on too tight, and then you end up having everything slip through your fingers.
Number one, Henry, would have been this, and that is, my whole identity was, I'm a hockey player. That's all I knew. Growing up, it was so competitive in our household and I think my brother and I fought every day of our life. And it was over, and we competed every day of our life. And so when all of a sudden you're not measuring up, that's your identity. I didn't know anything else. And so I'm sitting back going, man, what do I do if it's not hockey? I'm a failure. And that's when I found, wow, God is saying, my identity isn't that I'm a hockey player. My identity is my character. Everything is through him, and he's got plans for me. He's got a purpose for me, and I need to just trust him and learn from him what are the gifts he's given me, and how does he want to use me. And it was like, for me, you're right, it was a big relief and weight, because when I lived on Vancouver Island, I had unbelievable billet family, and towards the end, this was March, when we didn't make the playoffs and everything. There was a big, huge, there was beautiful mountains. I lived in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, and I was pretty down. I pictured myself jumping off the bridge. I was pretty down. And the next day after I pictured that, I get in the mail a little track, I call them, a little short page little track from my Aunt Jean, my mom's oldest sister, who was a nun for 10 years, dropped out of the convent, dropped out and got married, had 2 kids. I hadn't talked to her all year. The only thing that could have happened was my mom saying, yeah, John's having a tough time. I don't know. But I get this track from her, and it said, you have worries, you have fear, you have troubles, give all your problems and issues to God, and he will take care of you. And I read that track from front to back. So it's just interesting. That was towards the end of the year. And it gave me peace that, okay, John, don't focus on the bridge. And then, isn't it interesting that then the next thing happens, I meet Lori about 3 weeks later. We go to church a few weeks later. It was, you can sit and say it was all going to happen, but God was tugging on me for something different, obviously. So, which he's doing for all of us. The door's open. He's knocking on the door for all of us. So I just didn't know.
Yeah, it's like, as Henry mentioned, yes. So yes, are we listening? Number one. Number two, are we willing to let go of or move away from the ordinary world? And that's so seductive, right? Because as perhaps frustrating, upsetting, and even frightening to some degree of, we've all been in those places where we found ourselves in a pretty deep, dark hole, and wondering, like, is there, number one, like, is there actually light up above? And number two, it's like, if there is, like, how do I get out of it? And I don't want to say despair necessarily, but we've all been in some pretty dark places. The thing is, though, it's interesting, John, in the work that we do in our business, there's a clear distinct, like you can tell there's a clear distinction. Those folks that are choosing to hold on to this ordinary world, which probably is fine in many respects, but it's not the next thing, or it's not like, I don't think there's a lot. My opinion is there's not a lot of growth available in our ordinary world. It's when we are challenged. I know there's, what is it? Proverbs 27:17, right? As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And it's like, I mean, it could show up that iron, the sharpening tool could show up, manifest itself in a number of different ways. It's interesting how, I think I don't know if we're going to unpack it today, but the surrendering or giving up the ordinary world, I think sometimes actually gives us an opportunity or presents that sharpening tool that maybe wasn't there the day before. And I know one thing, Henry and I have talked a lot about this together, is that mentors are often those sharpening tools.
Yep.
And you clearly, I mean, aside from being an amazing coach in the skill of hockey, I'm imagining that one of the key roles that you play, or aspects of that coaching role, is being a mentor or being that sharpening tool for others. We just share a little bit more about how that idea, and maybe it's that Proverbs verse, or maybe it's just the concept of being a mentor or being a sharpening tool. Like, how has that played out for you in the work you're doing today? And maybe what's an example or two of seeing where that actually has been working?
So you're right on. You're right on. The first thing was, and it's funny because my personal email, iron sharpens iron, Proverbs 27:17 is there. And we want to make it by ourselves. We think we can do it. But and I always believe that someday, for almost everyone that lives on this earth, whether it's 89 years old on their deathbed or sometime, they come to a point where, boy, I couldn't do it myself, or I did it by myself and it wasn't what I thought. It wasn't as rewarding as I thought, whether it was fame, fortune, whatever. And this was what life had to offer. And I think they, maybe they take it to their death that, man, if I could do it all over again, maybe I would have lived differently. And God just wants us to live for Him, which means honoring Him and glorifying Him, but also it means putting others first, and everything that you learn, how Jesus lived His life is how He wants us to, but He wants us to be on purpose. And so there's something about living on purpose. And if I could sum it up this way, when I first, it wasn't until we lived in the Sioux that I guess I should say that was when I was in the factory. But when I first surrendered and gave up, you would find yourself drifting. Okay, I'm gonna take this team. We're gonna win the playoffs. We're gonna have this and this, and I learned, and I always say you fall off the track. And as a young believer, young Christian, it sometimes takes you a little longer to get back on the track when you're starting out, because I still have a lot to learn. We're always learning, right? So I would fall off the track, and I fell off the track when in Bozeman, Montana. We had such a good first couple years that, in my mind, we were going to have such a great year, and I'm talking to college scouts every day because they're asking about our players. I was going to be a young college coach, and it would take a lot of pressure off because you don't make a lot of money coaching junior hockey, and boy, it would take a lot of pressure off being able to maybe not have to live paycheck to paycheck and then some. And so I drifted a little. I didn't drift, but I thought of that. And because I thought of that, I actually focused on that. So I started coaching differently. I was coaching to win. Before that, God was teaching me, don't worry about the wins and losses. Worry about the young men that you get to mentor, you get to help guide them in the right direction. And he did that with, being on purpose. God would tell me every day, are you meeting with these young men? Are you getting to know them? Are you building a relationship so they know you, so you can guide them to me? And I call that living with a purpose. And there's nothing better than living with a purpose. But I didn't live with a purpose for a year there. The season ended. I had our captain, Billy Leahy, from Wisconsin. The locker room was a bunch of tears. I walk in. I didn't have tears. I shook the kids' hands. I thought we could have we lost in the first round of the playoffs. I go back to my office. Billy comes in, sits down. He goes, Coach, I know that you cared about me. You met with me. I got to know you. You took time to help me. I was your captain, but I'm not sure the other 22 guys in that room know that you cared about them. And it was a wake up call that I wasn't focused on what God wanted me to do every day, in not worrying about wins and losses and how I look and how our team is. I was focused that I was gonna get that next college coaching job, head coaching job, and instead of living in the moment, in the present for each, he woke me up, and that was a tough year because of that. And then every other year, it didn't matter wins and losses. What mattered was these men learning that their coach believed in them, that I believed in them, and believed in them as men, and believed in them as athletes, and saw the positives and let them know that, and got to know them. And that was not easy for me. God was challenging me. I was not at first good about pulling these kids and, hey, how you doing? What do you need? What can I help you with? But and I find myself sometimes doing that still, to where I need a wake up call. But instead of going by a year or 6 months or 5 months or a month, now it's a day or two, and God gives me a wake up call and back on the path. So.
Like paying attention, in other words, I'm hearing we benefit by being on constant lookout or listening. And I've certainly been accused of this, of just rattling on, professing all my wisdom and knowledge to the world. And it doesn't help, because I think more than anything, people get bored by it. Number two, I'm totally deaf to listening to the guidance that's being offered at any point in time. So you've, was I one other thing? Oh, the midnight shift. So take it a little bit back, 7 days a week. Was it a foreman for Chrysler?
Yeah. It was a stamping plant, Sterling stamping plant.
Yeah.
And that was my third year there, and they had promoted me to general foreman, actually. So I was in charge of the press. I had 5 foremen under me, and I was in charge of half the press line. So,
I'm sure there's not just one, John, but what was a lesson from that experience that you learned that helps or influences how you coach, lead, or mentor your players today?
Well, first of all, I would say that experience was that, and a few other of those early years. Everything, put it this way, everything since then has been a piece of cake. That was like, man, getting up at 3:30 in the morning, because when I was on first shift at Dodge Main Warren Truck Plant, I had to be there by 5. I was up at 3:30, had a long drive, and disciplining that, and then that job for 3 years in the stamping plant, and it was always 7 days a week. Um, my dad had built a work ethic in it, not built, but he had inspired a work ethic, so that wasn't the issue. But um, it, as my faith was growing, I was starting to, okay, God, where do you want me? I know it wasn't hockey, but where do you want to use me? What and how? What do I have to offer? Um, and when he answered it clearly with 2 coaching opportunities, I wasn't thinking that. I wasn't thinking that. I got a call out of the blue 2 consecutive days from people I hadn't talked to, and so one guy I'd never talked to. And I'm like, okay, God, this is not a coincidence that I'm, hadn't even thought about going into coaching. I'm engaged and ingrained to move up the food chain at Chrysler and or American Axle after that. What where did this come from? And so I guess the lesson I was learning then was, he wants me to talk to him all day long. He wants me to be on fire for him, live for him all routinely, not just occasionally, but all the time. And wow, is this freeing? Wow, is this awesome? Knowing that I'm going to make mistakes, I'm going to drift and go off, but that he still loves me and he accepts me, and I don't have to be perfect. I don't. There wasn't another measuring up for me. Maybe I felt like I didn't measure up. I never thought of that. Obviously, in playing the game, but I also was working and was getting measured by that as well. And I think it's just you talked about a moment where you just felt like this pressure, this release, and the relief, and that happened more than one time. It was like it happened, and it still happens to this day when you start getting ingrained in something and you think outside the box or whatever, and then God hits you on the head or reminds you, and you go, oh, wait a minute. I didn't, God, what should I do here? I mean, there's so simple things that people don't, you're asking them how you should respond to this young man's issue. He's not listening. He's not, and every time I humble myself and say, okay, God, I can't figure this out, and I know you can, and I'm sorry that I tried to figure it out. Please give me a sign of how I handle this situation. And then you start to go, why do I worry at all? He doesn't want me to worry. He doesn't want me to fear. He wants me to live every day to the fullest and not carry all this burden, all this weight of trying to measure up, of trying to be perfect or whatever. All right, God, this is awesome. I'm just going to let you handle it, because it's a lot more enjoyable to not stress over and fret over and fear over what's next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, John. It sounds like, just like, if I were to take a macro view of just your story, it's really a story about maybe a crisis of identity, or a battle rather of identity, fighting yourself versus fighting what you're called to be. And I think that's something that plays out in everyone's life, either little or large. And just by getting to know you and through this conversation, it sounds like you were always called to be a leader and called to be a guide and a mentor to people, specifically to young men. And so I want to ask you, were there moments in your coaching career where you had a specific player or a specific team where you realized, like, wow, like, I know you gave the example earlier about your playoff loss team with your captain, but have there been more moments like that where you're like, wow, like, this is like it's solidifying, this is what I'm called to do, this is what I'm called to be. And you can see the payoff of focusing on the young men that you're mentoring rather than the games you're winning.
Every year, and I have to be careful just because I sometimes pat myself on the back, but but since the day that God said, I want you to go this route, I felt like he gave me a gift of being able to see, well, that young man, you can tell he's carrying a heavy burden. He's not a lot of confidence. And I've grown to learn that most of the men that I get to have a chance to coach, none of them have confidence. They all lack direction, guidance, and confidence in themselves, right? And so I see my toughest pain, my biggest, when I look back, was 19 years old, trying to figure out if I'm any good or not. How do I measure up? And I was not measuring up. And so it wasn't by accident that God's got me coaching 18, 19, 20-year-olds usually. Now I'm back to high school, which is 17, 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds. But wanting to get them to, I want them to have the same peace that I have. I want them to realize they do measure up, that they are important, and that God's got plans for them, and they are loved. And I want these men to know that, gosh, I could have, because you can see that they don't have peace. They're trying to figure it out. They want to, be the popular one, or they want to just be accepted and somebody to give them a little bit of attention and like them. And so there's, most of the time God's, given me the gift of being able to say, okay, this, you can see this one's got his head down. This one needs this. And I'm not patting myself on the back. He's allowed me to see that. And so I can either say, oh God, I just want to kick his butt because he's not doing this or that. And that's where it's interesting, because where I would have normally, when I first started out, I was not anywhere close to where I am now. I was going to work our guys harder than anybody ever coached them before. And they were going to see more pain than they've ever seen. And we're going to win by outworking everybody else, because that's all I knew. And since then, every year is an experience where I get to see kids gain some confidence, whether it's in hockey or not, whether it's just being able to realize that they got some strengths, that somebody told them that they don't have any strengths, and that they are important, that they are loved, and that they don't have to turn to anything else except hopefully God someday, and for affirmation, for direction and guidance and acceptance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How, I see a lot in my generation. I'm sure, and it's in every generation. You're a teenager, you're getting out of high school. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of past before you, and there is a crisis of identity. And unfortunately, I think in the society we have now with technology and social media, that's amplified by a million and a billion. It's now you're not only looking inward. It's okay, who do I want to be? What do I want to believe? It's okay, now I'm contrasting all of that to every single person I've ever met and every single person that I've ever interacted with on social media. I'm saying, oh, they're doing this, they're doing that. I'm not measuring up to this. And it's we've talked about it before. Using the wrong measure, or not accepting the call to your mission. Obviously, the call for you is to be a mentor and a coach and a leader to young men. And the measure you could use, if you wanted to use one, was are these kids growing up to be strong, capable leaders in the world? And so I wanted to ask you how, if you could talk to an entire generation, let's say my generation or the generation below me, you know, it's like what would be the advice you would give to kids that, you know, maybe they're not playing hockey, they're not playing a sport, but they need that call to a mission over comparing themselves to everyone else's?
So it's interesting because when we had our camp this summer, I came in and sat down, and all the coaches were. It was in between going out I think outside or whatever, and I counted you as well, Henry. But every one of you were on your phone. I just came in and I'm thinking, yeah, these guys are all over the place, all different colleges and cities. Yeah, they'll be talking and getting to know each other. And for 15 minutes, everybody was on their phone. And you know, you just see what the damage is done with the phone, with social media, and you said it, comparing, and nobody measures up. We're all flawed, and we aren't even close. Like none of us are close to where we need to be, and that's on purpose, right? We God is a selfish God. He wants us all to need Him first and need Him the most, and want to turn to Him. But our world looks at that as weakness. But what I see is I sit back and I see people that are secure in themselves or not. And the ones that I see that are the most secure in themselves are the ones that have not relied on status, affirmation from the world, job, whatever it is, money, whatever it is, car. They're not as secure as they think they are. But I see the most secure from folks that are so rooted in their faith that it doesn't matter if they're getting the attention right now. It doesn't matter if they're getting to talk right now. In fact, they'd rather not talk. They'd rather listen and help. Those are the people that are the most secure, and it is enlightening to be around them, because it is amazing, because you can clearly see when people want attention for the right reasons or whatever, and so I want these young men to know social media, cell phones, they're not going to help you, and in fact, it's amazing what that has done for us. The opposite. It's really hurting. I think the development of our young folks, learning how to care for other people, learning how to submit or to not worry about themselves and to grow and learn that they don't have to whatever it is, keep looking for attention and keep looking for affirmation, and that's what you see. And you're not going to find it in the phone, but unfortunately, it is so entrenched with everyone, not just 19, 18, 17-year-olds, but 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds. It's so sad. And if you don't see that, and you don't tether yourself, we're all going to go, oh, I just spent the last 3 hours on my phone. I didn't realize that. My generation would feel guilty about that, but the younger generations come up, they don't feel guilty. They feel like I got a lot done. I did this, I did that, I did this. But in the meantime, they didn't. There's a lot of wasted time, and 3 hours is probably not saying what it really is, and so I imagine God sits up there and goes, man, I'm a little worried, because true interaction and true what do you say, submission to Him is getting blocked by our social media and our phones, and they don't realize how bad it's actually got. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I think you did. I think it's in a lot of ways, and probably more ways than not, I think it's antithesis to how would I say it? What men should be called to be as they grow up. I know I went through a journey when obviously I got the 1.73 gene, was not a good student. Went to college just knowing that that's kind of what everyone else was doing at my high school. So I did it. COVID hits, and then, everyone's chronically online because we can't see each other in person, and so I get used to that. I think a lot of my friends, a lot of my peers would probably agree. That became the norm, seeing each other through a screen like we are now versus meeting and, talking in person. And so I went through this journey of, that being the status quo and having to untrain myself to make an effort to be like, okay, like, let's go out to eat, let's go do something, and not having my relationships and my friendships just be, through it almost felt fake looking in hindsight. Like, were they even real? Like, how much did I get to know you? It's just the chronic online behavior really just chipped away at me. And it wasn't really till I started working, I dropped out of college, I started working, and I met my girlfriend, and it really like made me realize, okay, I'm not called to be just a chronically online young male in, 2022, just kind of letting my life drift away. I'm called to be a partner. I'm called to be a husband. Called to start a family. Like, that's what I think a lot of young men are called to do. And the chronic online, the social media is just the biggest roadblock to that. And, that's just my opinion on, what I think a lot of men are called to do. I think a lot of them are. Obviously, they have different paths. Everybody's different path in life. But I can tell you that every father I've ever met has said that that's been their greatest calling, their greatest reward. And, having a generation of men cut themselves off from that reward, I think is, it's a travesty.
Well, and with it is responsibility and accountability, and and we're supposed to be, just like you were. Your dad raised you, and he raised you to survive in the real world. And what are the skills you're going to need to survive in the real world, right? And are are we giving those skills to the young men and women that are now coming out of high school and into college and into the workplace? And boy, it's a for sure no, because they're when they're getting into the workforce, there's a lot of things that are missing. One is showing up, and one is accountability and caring for others. And it's really, your dad said it earlier. You become a team, right? Well, everything we do is about being a team, and we were meant to do life together with others and grow from others as iron sharpens iron. And when we take that away, which we are with the phones, but I don't think we want to tell. I don't think folks that are really hooked on the phones, I don't think they would believe and hear that. I think there's like, oh, this is not affecting me. This is my life. And I'm not missing out on anything. They don't really know that. And when are they going to know that? When is that going to come to a fruition that, wow, I've missed out on a lot, and it's probably happening now, right? And in the meantime, there's so much to raising you, like your dad did, and then letting you go free, and then letting you make mistakes, right? And you only do that by being in person, showing up, being there, and learning through hands-on. And I don't know if we're getting that early enough to really learn and grow. And that's certainly not. The phones aren't helping. That's for sure. Social media is not helping.
No, it's one of those where John and I realize as well as just as a parent, and the public figure I am in the ways that I am, is that there's a responsibility to be a steward rather than be be that objective steward rather than that subjective, superstar. And it's one of those where you hope and pray on a regular basis that our peers, realize that we do have a responsibility to others, and that maybe helping others find their mission in life starts with us getting clear on what our own is.
Yeah.
It's like, Natalie and I can't help Henry or our daughter find that if we're not as clear on ours, or at the very least, we're not just going to work discerning and discovering our own.
Yeah, and you mentioned and Henry mentioned it too. I didn't think about COVID. We were isolated, right? And so we were doing life by ourselves, and we didn't need anybody. And now you hopefully you realize that, wow, really the mission is that we need people around us, because that's where we grow. It's where we stop focusing on me, and that's where we're going to sink or swim. And unfortunately, that little pause didn't help us. But I think we were going that way anyway. I mean, without it, I think we were going to get hooked on the phones one way or the other, and it was going to go that way sometime, and maybe it just got sped up. That's all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go outside. That's the message. That's the solution.
There's every parent now that has a young child. They say that, oh, I just want them to go play outside. I just want them to, but they're also at the same tokens allowing them to watch TV. Like my parents had no problem with saying the TV is off. We don't watch the TV right now. And your only option is to go outside, or I got some chores for you inside. You know what I mean? No problem. And you got to do them sometime, but I'll give you the option. You can go outside. Well, we're going outside. And they never had to push us, but it's different, and I don't think it helped us when we're trying to teach that, don't ever tell your child no. Don't ever say no to them, because you're going to, their creativity, you're going to, whatever the word is, stifle their creativity and this and that. When in reality, our kids at young ages, most of the time, they need structure, they need consistency, they need love unconditionally, but they need that structure, which guides them to responsibility down the road, and hopefully learning how to care for others, and going out and getting in trouble because they tackled Joey too hard, and then they argued about this. You don't learn by sitting inside, So all those interactions, making up games, and knocking on doors and running, whatever, getting in trouble. It was all there was all the time to learn and grow, but we're missing out on a lot of that. That's for sure. They're missing out on a lot of that.
Well, John, I've got 3 final questions for you. They may be the most difficult ones of the day here. So pizza or hot dogs? Which would you choose?
Wow, pizza.
Okay. Coke or Pepsi?
I don't drink pop, so I don't know. If I had to choose, it'd be Coke, probably.
Okay. Spartans or Wolverines?
Man, that's tough. That's tough. I'm very close with the coach of Michigan State's hockey team. He's a Christian man, awesome. Got to coach with him at Shattuck, watch his kids get raised. But the Wolverines have been able to. I listen. I got to go Ohio, and I get beat up every time I go there, and so it's been nice the last 4 years. Both our hockey teams are beating Ohio State's hockey team, but when it comes to football, so I guess I'd have to say Wolverine.
There we go. Henry, I knew John was going to be the best guest we've had.
Good answer. All right, John. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. I know I really love the conversation. So we really appreciate you coming on. To everyone watching, we hope you enjoyed it. and we'll hope to have you back on.
Well, I'm honored to be on, and I really appreciate it. Great talking to both of you. Great getting to know you, Henry, and Preston. You've got a young man there that has been raised the right way, and God bless you both. Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.